welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our special guest author is a great friend of EWTN, Father Andrew Apostoli, CFR. His work is Fatima for Today, the urgent Marian message of hope, published by Ignatius Press. Welcome, Father Andrew. Always great to have you here.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Doug.
And it's really kind of special because you're here during the time of the anniversary of the passing of Lucia, right?
That's right.
It's about 5 years or so since she's gone. And you know, I always think of you with the Holy Spirit and also with Bishop Sheen. And Our Lady. Fatima is also important. You did a series for us once on Fatima.
I did, yes.
Actually on location.
Heaven's Peace Plane, right. We went over there, and it was very enjoyable. Yeah.
Right. So let me ask you about this book, because this is a new book for you. And my impression in reading through it, you talked about how you were trying to put everything in this book. They wanted you to do it. Ignatius, did they approach you about this? Was this a book they came up, or was it an idea you had?
No, that was their idea. I had submitted another book at the time, which they're still working on. They will be publishing on the Works of Mercy. And when I submitted that and they accepted to publish it, then they turned around and asked me, would you write a book for us on Fatima? Because they knew of my love for Fatima. They had mentioned how Father Fox was such a great
good friend of ours here at EWTN.
Yeah, he was so outstanding with Fatima, but he had recently passed away. And so they asked me, would you be willing to do a book on Fatima? And of course, I had such a love for Our Lady Fatima. It has influenced my life.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, right at the beginning of the book, you say, all throughout my life I have been devoted to Our Lady of Fatima. I understand being devoted to Our Lady, the Blessed Mother, but why specifically as Our Lady of Fatima?
Well, I guess I saw the movie that was so popular years ago, and you know, the story struck me, and especially that Our Lady was asking these prayers for the salvation of souls. And that just really stuck with me. And I said, you know, we've got to do everything we can to bring souls to heaven, praying for the conversion of sinners, and also the realization, as I grew older, of the dangers of communism that she had warned about, and the need for prayer and penance for peace in the world. So all of that formed a very important part of my own outlook as I became a religious Franciscan and then a priest. You know, so she's kind of guided me. It's often been said that the message of Fatima is really kind of a small, sort of a condensed version of the faith in some sense.
Okay. Well, let's talk more about that. I also noticed that you talk about here about that you over the years you've practiced the devotion of the 5 first Saturdays for many years. Now you did those for us, didn't you? Do like a mini series for it, right? As well, right?
Yes, yes. It's very important. You know, Sister Lucia's words on that were that this has to be done in order to hasten the total conversion of Russia and peace in the world. It's something Our Lady specifically asked for. In fact, it's very interesting when the chapter on that, when the Blessed Mother had said she would come and ask for this devotion. She called it the Communion of Reparation, and she appeared with the Christ child to Sister Lucia. She was the only remaining visionary. The other two had died shortly after, within 2 years after the apparition.
As it had been foretold.
That's right. Our Lady had told them, I'll come quickly to take you to heaven. And so Sister Lucia was a Dorothean sister, and the Christ child appeared with the Blessed Mother, and Lucia saw the heart of the Blessed Mother surrounded by this crown of thorns piercing the heart of Mary. And Jesus told her, those are the blasphemies that men have expressed against the heart of my mother. Who will take them from her heart? And
how were men doing that? What were the actions that would be considered like that?
Okay, later on, the question had come up. You know, why were there 5 first Saturdays, maybe not 7 or 9? And our Lord had told Sister Lucia in an apparition to her. He says, there are 5 because there are 5 blasphemies against the Immaculate Heart of Mary.
Oh, okay.
The 5 blasphemies are blasphemies against her Immaculate Conception. But you can see how Satan would certainly hate that, because she was the very first one over whom he had absolutely no effect at all, not for one moment. Then blasphemies against the Mary's perpetual virginity, and of course that's such a rebuke to the age we live in. Then blasphemies against Mary's divine motherhood as mother of the Son of God, and also being our mother. So people who have rejected that. And then the fourth blasphemy was those who keep little children from Mary, those who kind of turn them against her either by ignorance or by false ideas. And of course, Mary's a mother. And a mother has a right to the love of all her children, and all her children have a right to her love. So reparation for these people. And I even included, what the Lord was mostly pinpointing was those governments that had made this, like the communists, the Nazis, who had made this part of their indoctrination of children. But I even included reparation for those parents who don't tell their children about God. You know how many you hear today, well, I'll let my kid grow up and then, make his own decision. I wonder if they'd ever say that about going to school.
Right, exactly.
They wouldn't do that.
Yeah. All these decisions they get to make on their own.
That's right. And the fifth reparation was for those who blaspheme Mary by desecrating her images. And there's been a lot of that, as you know, the last few years.
Right, yes, exactly. Now, also in the beginning of the book, you talk about the idea that your intention was to write a book that would combine 3 essential elements about Our Lady of Fatima. So let's take them one by one. The first one was historical facts. So you were concerned with getting the facts right?
Correct, yes, that's right. So what they asked me at Ignatius Press was by saying, put everything in it. Said, let's have one book where people can read this book and know something about the entire message. So I went into the background of what was going on in the world in World War I, then about the backgrounds to the children and so on. But then when it came to the apparitions, as you know, the first thing the children experienced were 3 apparitions from the Angel of Portugal, the Angel of Peace. And I wanted people to know that because there are beautiful prayers that have come to us out of that. One is called the Peace Prayer, the Pardon Prayer, and the second one is called the Angel Prayer. They're very beautiful. We even put them at the end of the book, So I wanted people to know what the angels were doing and why they came.
Well, I was going to say, why do you think the angel came? I guess in general there's this idea of preparation. What was the preparation? Why did they need to be prepared?
Well, see, he taught them, for example, to pray by giving them those prayers, and he told them, pray these prayers often. He said, Jesus and Mary have great designs for you. Then he also wanted them to learn to make sacrifices. He said, make a sacrifice of anything you can. And the children, it's amazing how it struck me when I read about them, the way Sister Lucia wrote about it in her memoirs. It was amazing how generous the children became. And that was absolutely necessary for Our Lady's, her first apparition, May 13th, 1917. She asked them, are you willing to accept sufferings that God will send you for the peace of the world and the conversion of sinners? And they said yes. See, and I think it was the angels' preparation, teaching them to make sacrifices, that really stirred a generosity in these little children.
Well, it struck me on page 23, second apparition, summer of 1916. It's kind of an interesting one where the angel kind of shows up at the well, saying, "What are you doing?" Kind of saying those words must have been a very strong impression on the children because they would respond very faithfully to the angel's second message: "Pray, pray very much." Why was he concerned? What was he disappointed in? Why was he challenging?
Well, they had the first apparition. They were left in this light, and it just overawed them. But I guess as time went on, they sort of slipped away from an urgency. And his words, and what are you doing? Really made them understand. And from that time on, they became very, very fervent in their prayers and in their their sacrifices. And of course, then the third apparition, where he brings the Eucharist to them, that made a deep impression. 2 of the children had not even received their first Holy Communion, but they did receive the Eucharist from him. The little ones, Francisco and Jacinta. So it was, and that desire remained in the 3 children, all, very strongly, the Eucharist.
Well, you talk about the messages, you talk about sacrifice, reparation, intercession for the conversion of sinners, the fruit of peace, and this is the one you were talking about, bearing sufferings humbly. Why humbly?
Well, a lot of people suffer, but they don't like it. They always say about suffering, it either makes you better or bitter. and how many people become very bitter over their suffering because they resent it. But the little children, again, through the generosity they had learned, they were willing to make sacrifices. In fact, there's one story which involves the three of them. It was a very hot day, and they were very thirsty, and they were out in somewhere walking along the road, and they were passing through a field, and they were very thirsty. So Lucia told the other two, I'm going to go to that farmhouse over there and ask for some water. And the lady was very kind. She gave them cold water in some pitcher or something. And Lucia brought the water to the children, and she offered it first to Francisco. And he says, no, I'm not going to drink it. Although he was very thirsty, I'm going to offer this as a sacrifice. Right. Then she went to Jacinta, and Jacinta said, well, I'm going to make a sacrifice too. She always didn't
They're one-upping each other.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, she followed her brother. But the funny thing was, she was hungry because they used to give their food. They used to eat wild fruit and things like that because they give away their nice lunches to the poor children. And so she was a bit hungry and very thirsty. And they were near this pond, and the crickets were making a lot of noise, the frogs and everything else. So little Jacinta says to her brother, would you please tell the frogs to keep quiet? And so he said, it's annoying me, I'm getting a headache. And so little Francisco says to his sister, well, you know what, we could offer this as a sacrifice. She goes, okay, tell them they can continue to sing, Right. I mean, it's an innocence of a child, but a generosity.
Right, and is that a message for all of us, that in order to really hear the message, we have to be prepared?
I think so, yes. I mean, if we're too attached to the world and we're always catering to our own desire. It gets drowned out,
right? Yeah.
It gets, we got a lot of interference.
Right. Now, the second focus, you say, is the message of prayer, sacrifice, suffering, and holiness of life, which is what we're kind of talking about here.
Yes.
Where else did we hear that in the messages when Our Lady actually came?
Well, when she would say, she said, the closing thing she said after the miracle of the sun, the children, by the way, did not see the miracle of the sun.
Really?
They saw Our Lady, and there was actually a series of apparitions. Our Lady appeared with St. Joseph as representing, with the Christ child, representing the joyful mysteries. And the Christ child and St. Joseph blessed the world. He's the only saint that appeared at Fatima besides Our Lady. So his power, and I think it was to stress the importance of family life and so on. But that represented the joyful mysteries. Then they saw Christ as a young man, probably anticipating the luminous mysteries. Our Lady was also seen as Our Lady of Sorrows, sorrowful mysteries. And then finally she appeared as Our Lady of Mount Carmel as the glorious mysteries. But after the children saw that, and Our Lady was ready to leave. In the meantime, the miracle of the sun is going on. Our Lady said to them, tell the people to stop offending my son because he's already been so grievously offended. And she did say that on another occasion. And the children were very deeply moved by that because Our Lady said it with great sorrow, And so they wanted people to live good lives,
Right. Now, one of the things interesting in chapter 5, The Beautiful Lady Came from Heaven, is where Lucia described Our Lady's appearance. She appeared to be about 17 years old. She wore a mantle and a tunic that seemed to be made of light, etc. She talks about the rosary. Why do you think she comes at an age of looking like she's around 17 years old? Is there any?
Well, I guess there's a certain... It's almost like a prime of life, and probably, vigor and the ability to enjoy life and so on. Maybe we'll all be that age. I'd like to go
that
down
might be a nice age for us to be when we're in heaven there. Okay.
You're right. I think so. Yeah. Well, certainly don't want to be 120.
There you go. Elsewhere, right in that chapter, you also talk about her talking about heaven. And the question about heaven, but also this was one exclamation: purgatory is real. Then Lucia asked about two young women who recently died. They were friends of Lucia. This is the one that always gets me. I got to talk to Father Fox many times on many programs about Fatima, and this was the one that always got me when Lucy is asking about Maria, who it turns out she's already in heaven. Right. Now, Maria is 16 years old, and you're thinking, well, that's not too bad. She's in heaven. But then she asks about the other girl, Amelia, and the news isn't so good.
No, that's right. That's right. She's going to be in purgatory till the end of the world. Well, the way I kind of handled that is that perhaps we did find out later on, or they did find out, that she might have been living a bit of an immoral life, and perhaps received the grace of conversion right at the moment of her death. And she would not have had chance to make the temporal punishment, to make up for that temporal punishment on earth. And so the purification she would have needed would have been greater. So that might account for that long time. But it is startling. It kind of tells you, boy, I better get with the program right away.
When you refer to temporal punishment, what do you mean?
Well, the temporal punishment can be seen in two ways. We say you go to purgatory and you suffer you don't suffer what hell is. You suffer a fire of purification, yes, but it's not hell, because hell is characterized by complete despair. In the second, Father Benedict Rochelle used to say, the second happiest group of people after the saints are the souls in purgatory, because they know they're going to go to heaven. See, but it does two things. Sin always causes a kind of damage to the mystical body and to the spiritual life of the person. That must be repaired, and that's a reparation there. But also, too, the growth that was needed, because this person was apparently not corresponding with God's grace. She was not growing to the point she should have been at when she died. And that's made up in purgatory. I believe it's
Chapter 6, Our Lady's July Apparition, First Secret, the Vision of Hell, an important message with 3 parts. And you say, without a doubt, the appearances of Our Lady in July and October of 1917 were the most powerful and important of all the Fatima apparitions. And we talk about when Our Lady gives them a vision of hell. Why do you think Our Lady did that?
Well, it certainly wasn't to threaten the little children. They already were told they were going to go to heaven. But I think it was a message for us through the children. Hell is real. In fact, that's why she came. She came because her children were being lost. As she told the children after they saw the vision, she said, "You have seen hell where poor sinners go, and it is to prevent this. God is establishing devotion to my Immaculate Heart." And that image, it also does too. First of all, for those who are leading bad lives, they need to turn around. And hell is a detriment. I cited the example. Did you see the same story of the Padre Pio, where the man went to confession to him, and Padre Pio told him, "You better change your way of living. You're going to end up in hell." And the guy said, "I don't believe in hell." He said, "You will when you get there." A little bit too late.
Page 55.
Yeah. But what it also has a meaning, for us to be a deterrent against sin. Let's live our lives in the right way. But also, it inspired the children, and it should inspire us to pray for the conversion of sinners, that no one be lost. That was little Jacinta, of all the 3 children, she was most affected by that. Yeah, and she used to say, "I'm praying that no one will ever go to hell." She said, "I wish everybody would see the vision of hell, that no one would ever go there."
Right. Well, you say fear of hell can motivate someone to turn from sin. And I thought that was interesting, because so much of today, sometimes we kind of say, well, that kind of fear, getting people to behave in an appropriate way out of fear isn't a good thing. But, it may not be the perfect thing, but it's not a bad thing either, right?
No. If your heart is going and they inject something into the heart to pump you up, you need that. That may not be the only thing you need, but to get started in the spiritual life, sometimes to make that major turn. See, if people were motivated out of love, then they wouldn't need that fear. But if people are entrenched in their sins, there's so much selfishness. The only thing that could possibly motivate them is some form of self-love. And if I thought I'm going to spend all eternity in the fire of hell, I mentioned the sufferings of hell, and be without God's love, and have to see the devil who's so terrible, I think I better get my life together. So it's a motivation. It's correct what you said. It's not going to get you that far down the road, but it may save you from going over the cliff.
Right, exactly.
And that's what we need.
And, we could use a little more of that cliff protecting, I think. Too much cliff diving going on. The third part at the beginning, you talk about the focus is to answer certain questions and objections that have been raised concerning the message of Fatima. 1, was the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary made properly by Pope John Paul II? The other one, was the third secret of Fatima fully revealed by the Vatican? What say you?
Well, my research shows me I found some very important things in regard to the consecration that was made by Pope John Paul II. See, in order to properly understand what he did, which was he included the consecration of the world, which many people objected, said that he should not have done that because the Blessed Mother, Our Lady, did not ask for that. Mm-hmm. That is correct. Our Lady did not ask for the consecration of the world to the Immaculate Heart. The Sacred Heart of Jesus asked for that through a Portuguese mystic by the name of, she's blessed now, Blessed Alexandrina de Costa. Mm-hmm. And Alexandrina was told to bring this message to the Holy Father. So the Portuguese bishops knew of Alexandrina's message, to consecrate the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, coming from the Sacred Heart.
Right.
And of
also
course
coming from Portugal.
Yeah, Portugal, right. Two of them are from Portugal. And then Lucia, of course, having Our Lady's request to have Russia. Mm-hmm. Well, the bishops were confronted, with the fact we got two consecrations. We're not going to ask the Pope to do two consecrations, So they said to Sister Lucia, present this petition. Say, ask the Holy Father to consecrate the world with special reference to Russia. At first, she hesitated. Which I can understand because maybe she wanted to look, the Blessed Mother didn't ask for that. Why should we do that?
Right.
But the bishops were asking her, and one of them was her spiritual director. Right. So what did she do? She went and prayed for 2 hours before the Blessed Sacrament, and she said, Jesus told her, do what the bishops are telling you. Right. And that's why there's nothing wrong with the consecration of the world. Pope John Paul II did it the same way Pius XII did. And the reference was a reference without name. Mm-hmm. And the reason that, and this is very important because people say the Pope didn't mention Russia by name. You remember, you got to look at the big picture that a Pope has to deal with. Pope Pius XII in 1942 was right in the middle of World War II. Russia was an ally of the Americans and the British during World War II. The Pope tried to remain very neutral because then he could deal with both sides, see? Mm-hmm. If he had mentioned Russia by name, and the only name, well, the Allies could, be furious about that because it would upset Catholics. What are we fighting for with the Russians? But the second thing is he would be open to the very logical criticism. What about Nazi Germany? Right. What about fascist Italy? You didn't condemn them. Right. You didn't mention them. So in order to remain neutral, in order to not get, perhaps greater diplomatic problems, he made the reference. Mm-hmm. And when but the only problem with his consecration in 1942 is he didn't do it with all the bishops of the world. He did it with some bishops in Portugal the first time. He did it with a few bishops in the Vatican, but not all the bishops of the world. And Sister Lucia said it was incomplete. Okay. She never said he did it in the wrong way. It was incomplete because he didn't have all the bishops with him. Right. And that's exactly what Pope John Paul II did. By the way, because I'm sure a lot of.
But he actually did it, right? John Paul II.
He did it, and he did it with all the bishops.
Right.
See, but he followed the same pattern. He consecrated the world and made a special reference to Russia. He said he put it this way, something to the effect that we especially consecrate the nations that you are most desiring to be consecrated to you. Mm-hmm. See, and he was going to mention Russia by name, and this is interesting. At the time, Solidarity was just beginning. This is 1984. Mm-hmm. Solidarity was just beginning in Poland. Right. And the Russians already had their tanks and their troops on the eastern Polish border. He was afraid that if he mentioned Russia, he'd infuriate Brezhnev, or whoever the leader was at that time, I don't know if it's still Brezhnev. They would come right in and crush Solidarity. So he did it exactly as Pius XII did, and Sister Lucia later said, heaven accepted it.
Okay, and the other one was the third secret of Fatima fully revealed by the Vatican.
Well, Sister Lucia said when Cardinal Bertone went to visit her, he showed her the actual manuscript. She had it in her hand. She said, this is what I wrote. This is it. And then later on, after it was publicized by the Vatican around the time after the beatification of little Jacinta and Francisco, Sister Lucia said, what the Vatican has revealed is precisely what I have written. There's nothing else. This is the third secret.
Right. Why do you think, as we're running out of time, why do you think there always seems to be people who were acting, well, this really didn't get done, and that's not really there's more to the secret. There's a different secret.
You know, I think Cardinal Ratzinger, the Holy Father, when he was cardinal, he put out a theological commentary in which he said, many people are going to be disappointed with what the third secret holds, because people were thinking it's going to be some cataclysmic thing, or the church would be overrun, or there'd be an atomic war, but there's nothing like that, he said, and so people are going to be disappointed. And a lot of people were so hepped up, you know, that perhaps they felt, well, the Holy See might be holding something back, conspiracy idea, but there's nothing like that at all.
Right. Well, I think the Holy Father, or what appears to be the Holy Father, being slain, and all the bishops and priests die. It seems pretty cataclysmic.
And you know what? Already. One more thing, Doug, is suppose, just for sake of argument, supposing the consecration wasn't done, and Sister Lucia was alive, and she said it was.
Right.
Who's going to do it again? And who's going to proclaim it to be, valid? And then, if you can't do that, then Our Lady's words are contradicted. Because she said in the July Apparition, in the end, the Holy Father will consecrate Russia to my Immaculate Heart. Many souls will be converted, and an era of peace will be given the world. So you can't contradict Our Lady either.
Right. Well, I think a lot of people go and say, well, where's this era of peace? How come we don't see it?
Well, see, that's where I made the distinction between consecration and conversion. Okay. Russia is going through a conversion.
Okay, let me just ask you, just before we go, this particular book, my impression from reading it is that this was a lot of work.
It certainly was. It took me a year. There were times I got so discouraged because I was up so late and I was getting exhausted in doing the book that I really wanted to sort of throw the towel in. But you know what came over me, Doug, as I was doing the book? I felt the Blessed Mother wanted me to write it for her.
Really? Okay.
And that kept me going, because if Mary wants it, then I want it. Even if I'm going to die a martyr for this book, I'm going to.
That's right. You don't want to have to answer later to Mom, right?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure, Father. Great to have you here. The one and only Father Andrew Apostoli, author of Fatima for Today, the urgent Marian message of hope, published by Ignatius Press, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Join us next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark.